morning to everybody. As Lena said, I will give a presentation of ERAR. It actually started years ago. It was called Supervisor at that time. It won some international rewards. Probably that's how the EU got to learn about it. It evolved. Now it's no longer only online tool for monitoring the transactions of the public sector entities, but there have been other characteristics added to it. So it's more of a portal which can serve not only the Commission, but also to the general public, to journalists, and also to the police, actually, to obtain various data that they need in their course of work. What I will do today is I will try to present how ERAR functions and what kind of information you can find there. And you might want to try to think of how such a tool could help you in what you're actually doing. Definitely, we are affected, and also this tool is affected by the fact that we are part of the EU. So there are many directives that have been transposed into the Slovenian legislation. And this also affected how this tool was being upgraded. And I will mention a few features that we have and how these were added to the previous tool due to the transposition of the EU directives. I will, as I mentioned, I will start with presenting ERAR. But ERAR is, if you want to understand it and how it functions, you really have to also know the, let's say, the competences of the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption and of the provisions, some provisions of the Integrity and Corruption Prevention Act. Because some of the competences we have, some of the monitoring activities that we have to perform, give us the legal basis to actually obtain certain data from various databases. And instead of running back and forth to various state institutions and asking them to provide us with the data that would help us do our investigations or monitor asset declarations or check for, let's say, gifts that were given but shouldn't have been given, or detecting unlawful lobbying activities, we actually decided that it's good that we have the legal basis for this platform, which is called ERAR, in our law. But how come that we got to this idea? It actually started in 2011, when at that time, under the previous Chief Commissioner, Mr. Goran Klemenčić, we got the idea that we should somehow facilitate the work of our investigation teams. At the same time, that we could facilitate the work of investigation journalists and of the NGOs and of the public. Why? It was because the Commission has really broad competences and monitoring tasks. And with all the monitoring activities that are ongoing, we couldn't actually monitor effectively all various obligations that are given to various individuals or state institutions. Let's say monitoring whether lobbying has been registered, whether gifts received have been registered, whether asset declarations have been submitted on time. This was too much. We were, as Lena mentioned, 35 people. And for example, asset declarations were to be submitted by 22,000 declarants. We have 2,000 state institutions and local authority institutions that are obliged to draw up integrity plans and to report to us. Each of these institutions also has to keep a register of gifts and report on a yearly basis to us. Then we have anti-corruption clause, which has to be inserted in the contracts on purchasing different goods above 10,000 euros net worth. So all of this had to be monitored, and with 35 members of staff, we couldn't do that. So the idea at that time of the chief commissioner and the 2 deputies, which are our collegial body, was how could we facilitate the work of the commission so that it's done easily, but also at the same time involve the public in this monitoring or oversight. And I don't know how it's in Macedonia, but in Slovenia, the public is quite interested in what is going on in anti-corruption forum. So we decided that we will develop a transparency tool. And we called it Supervisor. What was the purpose of this tool was just to provide the public the data on the public sector entities' transactions. So either you're a state institution or you're a local level, so municipality institution, whatever transaction you're making, this will be shown in the portal. So this was the idea. And we had a very nice guy from the outside who was a freelancer, an IT person, and he thought this would be a great opportunity for me to develop such a tool. Okay, this guy is really an expert. He works for UN, for the International Monetary Fund, for various institutions, so he knows what he's doing. And he said, I'm doing this for free. And he actually developed Supervisor as the platform, and when we launched it in 2011, Slovenia has 2 million inhabitants. On the first day, we had 1 million clicks, and it collapsed, which means half of Slovenia was checking the website because they were interested in what kind of data they can get. We didn't expect such an interest from the public, and we also didn't expect that the public will take this information seriously and act on it. So what they did, one of the legal provisions in our law restrict business, doing business of office holders with state institutions or municipalities. I'm sure you have something similar. So if you're a mayor and at the same time you have a company or your wife has a company, that company cannot do business with your municipality. We call it business restrictions. And of course, that was one of the most interesting topics. People at the local level, especially at the local level, were interested to know whether the mayor's wife was doing business with the municipality, the mayor of which her husband is. And they were checking the websites, and they could just insert the name of the company and the name of municipality and see the transactions, and voila. There were more than 400 violations of our law detected just in the course of a few weeks. And this was reported to the Commission. And then we actually realized that this tool is a powerful one because it can actually help the Commission to do the work that we were supposed to do, because we were getting the reports on violations. Yes, it could be done by us, but we were lacking information. I don't know who is the wife of a mayor of a little municipality and what kind of company she has. So I could not link these two data, but people there, they were able to do that. and also the journalists and the police officers. And, you know, in few times in the history of this tool, it happened, and I will mention also that we had difficulties with having the tool function. And when the tool ceased to function for, let's say, a few hours, we would get immediately phone calls from the journalists, from the police officer, inspectors. Like, this tool is not functioning. You know, I'm investigating this case. I have to have access to your data. So they're actually using this tool to help them in their work. Later on, and this is why I said that a few times the tool ceased to function, we had an issue of ownership. So this is something to bear in mind when you're developing your own tool, or any kind of tool that you want that it's yours and that you are the only manager of a tool. As I mentioned, it was developed by an outside expert. And when the previous management left and the new management came, they couldn't speak the same language at a certain point in time. And because that person had all the codes and everything that was his work, he was able to shut down the tool. And he did. And at that point, we learned that it's good to develop the tool in a way that we own it. So it's ours. Nobody can shut it. So outsourcing something could be a bit tricky if you're not conscious of having it covered from the legal perspective. We didn't have any contract because it was a voluntary work, and it was because of the friendship between this expert and the chief commissioner, who was very, let's say, visionary in what the commission should look like and what kind of work it should perform. But with the new chief commissioner at that time, this didn't work in the same way. So what we did is we again programmed the whole tool. So an internal employee, IT person, wrote the program language for a similar tool, but also added some features. Because at that time, the EU law already developed to a certain point. Our law has changed as well. So we knew what we wanted to add to upgrade this tool. And we called it ERAR. So before it was supervisor, then we called it ERAR as of 2016. Of course, another very important aspect to bear in mind is to have the legal basis for such a tool in your law. And I will talk a little bit more about that later. As I mentioned, this tool was quite innovative, not only in the Slovenian environment, we got a Netco award for it, but also in the EU environment, and we got an award there as well, together with the Ministry of Public Administration that developed their own portal on public procurement. So we are trying to put as much as data as possible on the website online and enable all those who are interested in this data to use it and to reuse it, so to make their own analysis. So it has to be written in a certain machine-readable format so that they can reuse it and make their own analysis. And actually, they're doing it. Just last year, we concluded a project with Faculty of Information Studies, who had a doctoral student who was clustering companies according to certain types of transactions. We anonymized the data from this tool and gave all the data to them, and she was doing then the analysis. And she came up with quite interesting patterns. And this is how you can play with this data and try to link certain, let's say, people with certain companies or with certain state institutions and see whether there are some connections that transcend changes of the government, etc. So to explain now a little bit more about ERAR as such. ERAR was, when we designed it in 2012, 2011, at first we only had the information of the budget users and their transactions, financial transactions. So either state budget users or local authorities. So we were also able to get the financial transactions from 2003 onwards. We have the Public Payment Administration, which is part of the Ministry of Finances, and they're like the central body that is monitoring all these transactions that are being made. So whatever is paid out of a local municipality's budget or the state budget, it has to be registered and they have to be notified of it. So we went to them and we said, could you give us this data? We would really like to get this data, and we will not change the data, and we still are not changing the data. We are just getting the data and putting it online in a certain format so that it shows or enables certain analysis to be made. They agreed to that, and that was at the time when this supervisor was already let's say, in the process of being developed, and we were getting data from them. At some point in time, we were not that liked by the government that was in power at that time. So they instructed this Public Payment Administration to shut down this transaction of the data from them to us. And at that point, the journalists, the police officers, they raised their voices and they started asking, like, where's the data? It's not being updated. Because the data in this portal is updated daily. So we were trying to resolve the matter with the Ministry of Finances. We couldn't, so we were loud and we made it clear it's not us that are being a problem here. It's the government. They again started providing us with the data, probably because at this point, this tool was already an important tool and was recognized nationally and internationally. So they didn't want to be the bad guys. So they again provided us with the data. But what was the problem? At that point, we realized if you obtain data on the basis of a contract, one side, one party can just stop the contract. They can get out. They can say, we no longer want to provide you with the data. And if you don't have the legal basis to back up such a contract, they can actually do it. And at that time, we didn't have the legal basis. It was just a mutual understanding between our institution and the Public Payments Administration, because a few years ago, that Chief Commissioner, Klemencic, was visionary, as I said, and the government was following. They were on board with our ideas. But when the new government came, you know, this support for the Commission and our work stopped, or at least it minimized a little bit. So at that point, we realized it's not only that you need an internal person that designs the tool, that writes the program language, and that you have the ownership. It's also important that you have the legal basis for this tool. Why? Because at some point you might want to obtain the data and somebody decides not to give you the data from the database. And your tool is no longer that accurate, it doesn't present the whole picture, and then it's not that worthy for various professions that are using it. Also, it's important that you need a legal basis to be sure what kind of data you're giving to the public. We had a few lawsuits of a dean, for example, who filed a lawsuit because there was a certain data presented in this tool on her fees that she was receiving from the faculty that she led as a dean, because she was involved in working on various projects. And she didn't want that everybody saw that apart from her salary as a dean, she was earning a lot of money working on various projects. And of course, it caused tensions in the faculty. People are envious, they report. I'm pretty sure that's similar in all countries. So she sued us. And she said, you don't have the legal basis that my name appeared in that platform. And we lost. Yes, we didn't have the legal basis because our tool was based on mutual understandings and on contracts. We didn't have the legal basis that would say, you can obtain this and that data from this database, and you can obtain that, and that data from that database, and then you can link this data and make analysis. If you're working on law on protection of personal data, or on law on access to public information, you know how important it is that you have obtaining the data, connecting or linking the data, reusing the data. Everything has to be mentioned. If just one of the things is missed out in the legal basis, you can obtain the data, but you cannot link it with another data. And you have two data there that are just sitting on your table, and you can logically make a connection, but you cannot use the fact of how to connect this data because your legal provision does not allow you to do that. So whatever you continue working on in, let's say, investigation phase, when you will go to court and you will say, well, actually, I linked that and that data together, the court will say, did you have the legal basis for doing that? And you will have to say no. Which means that, like rotten apple in the American law doctrine, you cannot use that evidence because you got it on the unlawful legal basis. So, in 2014, what happened was that we added additional data to this platform, and that was the data on publicly owned companies. Our law already gave us some competences with regard to the publicly owned companies. So companies that have a majority shares of the state or of the municipality. But we were not able to present the data on how these companies are doing business transactions and with whom. What happened in 2014, we amended the law on access to public information. And that law, and it was also encouraged by us, of course, that it got amended, allowed us, well, actually, it started the whole processing of data from the publicly owned companies to this, to the Ministry of Finances. And it also allowed us to get that data on the basis of our contract. So in 2014, we started also presenting to the public the data from the publicly owned companies. This was, let's say, one big modification or upgrade of the tool. And then the next one happened in 2016 due to transposition of the EU directive on the electronic invoices into our national legislation. And of course, we were able to also transmit this data to the public because it was there, yeah? So this is how our tool evolved without having the legal basis for the time being. We actually changed our law in 2020, and we sat together with the Ministry of Justice that was preparing the amendments to the law, and with the Information Commissioner. In Slovenia, the Information Commissioner has a dual task. On one hand, they cover Protection of Personal Data Act. On the other hand, they deal with access to public information. So they have like two pillars. And we sat down with them in order to make a provision that would stand the court review, yeah, the judicial review. In case that somebody sues us for projecting the personal data or what kind of data to the public, if we go to court, the Information Commissioner can back us up and say, we checked it, we're the inspectorate for these two laws, the legal provision stands, and it's a good one. So in 2020, we finally got the legal basis for having the online tool, the ERAR. And it defines clearly which databases run by which bodies or state institutions are we getting the data from. And it also states which kind of data from those databases are we able to obtain. So everything is clearly listed. Also, another article in our law then describes which kind of data can be projected to be seen for the public, and which data, although we have it, we cannot share with the public due to protection of personal data, protection of secret data, stuff like that. Certain data we got from FIU, of course, we cannot share with the public. So we have two legal provisions that are quite long, but are quite clear and detailed. So now I would like to give you an overview of the databases managed by various bodies that we are getting the data from. One is, as I mentioned already, is the Public Payments and Administration. So this was actually the first body that we started collaborating with on this project. This was the body that agreed to share the data with us in 2011 on the basis of our contract or mutual understanding. And they are providing data from records on financial transactions of all budget users, either state level or local level. The next is the analytical accounting records of public sector entities. These are the transactions that are managed by the Ministry of Finances and other public sector entities. For example, each municipality has a municipality administration, and they're the ones that are managing the transactions, and they're the ones that have to submit this data into this register that is then that we get the information from. Then there are the records of received e-invoices. As I mentioned, in 2016, we adopted a law that regulates e-invoices. So how the structure of the e-invoice, the data in the e-invoice, and we have the records of e-invoices, and we get the information from there as well. Then we have business register and register of companies and of actual owners. This is important for the asset declaration system, where you have actual ownership. You don't have the legal ownership, but you know that somebody is de facto owner of a certain property. So we get the information from there as well. then it's the insolvency proceedings. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. How do you verify the actual ownership of some company?
Okay, I don't. You're okay to be on the video with this? I'll say it. I'm just checking. In the investigation, you mean? In the investigation?
In the registry, if someone has...
We're not checking whether the data in the registry is actual or not. We're just obtaining
It's
the
a real beneficiary, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. How do you verify the legal and the actual
That's part of the investigation case. As part of the ERAR, or let's say the platform, we don't do that. What we get is we either show to the public or we use for other supervisory and oversight tasks that the Commission has. So when you talk about the actual ownership, let's say, there was, I can give you a case. There was a mayor that supposedly didn't own anything. So he reported to us in the asset declaration form, I don't have any property, none whatsoever. At the same time, he was a mayor for 12 years. Before, he was a professor at some faculty. He was a diplomat. He wrote a few books. So you would expect that he has at least a car, right? Nothing. Then, to me, that sounded weird. As the head of the asset declaration department, to me, when I got this asset declaration form, it was weird. It was, of course, my colleague who was looking into it, he showed it to me and he said, isn't that weird? And I said, yes, let's look a bit deeper. And he started investigating. So he asked, he started with the property. So this guy has to live somewhere, right? So he was checking where he lived. And he lived, supposedly, in the parents' house. He's more than 60 years old, so still living with the parents. Okay, that was weird as well. But then we checked his bank transactions. And then we saw that he's making payments to pay for rebuilding the house, to pay for some tax that you pay to the municipality for water and sewage and stuff like that. And he was also paying various construction companies big amounts of money, like 20,000 euros, 18,000 euros, which should all be reported to us. If you have a change in assets or above 10,000 euros, you have to report it. So he was making payments above 10,000 euros, and he was not declaring that. You have to declare by end of March for the previous year that you made this transaction above 10,000 euros. So we were able to establish that actually the house that he lives in is actually his house. It's not his parents' house. The parents were no longer living there. They were in the elderly home. It was on his father's name. He had nothing. We checked everything. He had nothing. We established that. We asked him for clarifications, and he admitted that it was actually his house. He was the actual owner, but legally it was on his father's name, who was already living in the elderly home for years. So then, of course, we wanted him to change the asset declaration form, that it actually presents the actual fact. Or the actual situation.
But my question is about the companies, because the most of the illegal transactions are made over the companies. So we do not know which one is the real owner of the company.
Yes. Well, in one case, there were transactions being made on behalf of a company where we established that the transactions were made by people who were homeless people. We couldn't find them in our databases that we have access to, like the health insurance fund or the pension fund, or the Ministry of Finances also has its own register or database of all those people, employees in the public sector that get salary from the state or local budgets. So these people were like non-existent, and the case went to the police and the prosecution service, and they were able to then, because what we get, and as soon as it's a suspicion of a criminal offense, we have to refer the case to the prosecution service. We cannot deal with the case ourselves, because we might tamper the evidence or destroy the investigation or whatever. So it was then established that these people were recruited by somebody else who was de facto owning the company, so that the company was on their name and they were making the payments, but they couldn't make any payments because they were homeless. They didn't have any property. They couldn't have the money to make the payments on behalf of that company. And then this link was made by the prosecution and the police. But it started with that, looking into whether these people have a certain background that they could afford to make the payments, and that they couldn't. This was the start, and then they took over. It depends, on what kind of case you have. You have to think, when you have the certain facts, you have to investigate. In Slovenia, the Supreme Court also manages the database on the insolvency proceedings. So this is another very important database that we have access to, especially when you investigate somebody that is trying to hide the assets and wants to shut down the company and transfer the assets onto somebody else. So detecting the insolvency proceedings or the start of the proceedings on time to be able to check what is going on and to maybe protect the property not to get lost is another important thing. So we have access to that. Also, we have access to central registers of central security depositories. The bonds, stock, stuff like that. It's also important for our asset declaration forms, because this is one of the information that has to be inserted in the asset declaration form, and then you can link and you can check whether it corresponds with what the person wrote on the asset declaration form. Then we have the public procurement portal, access to that information. So every public procurement has to be publicized on the public procurement portal that is managed by the Ministry of Public Administration. It's important for business restrictions that I mentioned. It's important for the anti-corruption clause that has to be inserted in every contract above 10,000 euros of net worth. Yes?
Okay. I'm sorry for interrupting you. So since you mentioned that you have access to the bankruptcy procedures and insolvency procedures of the Supreme Court, my question was, do you consider in that cases accounts receivables from public officials, and do you have access to registers like factoring of receivables?
Insolvency proceeding register only contains data on companies that, or the physical persons that start the insolvency proceeding. We get data on the person, either legal person or the physical person that started the insolvency proceeding or against whom the insolvency proceeding started. And this is the most important data that we want to learn about, is because, yes, each person, either legal or physical person, in all these registers or all these databases that we have access to, we can be connected on the basis of a certain data. Our law stipulates that when we obtain information on a physical person, this information has to include the tax number or uniform central register number. When it comes to the legal person, it has to contain the tax number or registration number and the transaction, the bank account for transactions. Yeah. So on the basis of this data, we can then find a person, either legal or physical, in various databases and make the connections. So when it comes to factoring and stuff like that, we will not get the actual documentation. We will get, no. But the thing is that we can get red flag. We can get red flags. And that's the whole purpose. When you design a tool in a way that a certain data, when it connects to another data, which is a little bit unclear or makes no sense, it alarms you, then you can start investigation in that way. And this is why this is important for us. Also, we just receive the data. We don't get the documentation. If we want to ask something more, we have also in the law possibility to go to the Supreme Court and ask for the case file. And in that case, then we can continue with the investigation. Actually, according to our law, every institution has to provide us free of charge with any data, even if it's classified as secret. Confidential, yeah, you can have confidential, top secret, or whatever, depending on whether you're using, which kind of system you're using. But yes, we can get any kind of, even, let's say, data related to the army and purchasing of weapons. Of course, according to our internal rules, all those who are involved in investigation or dealing with any kind of, let's say, supervisory tasks that would involve handling such data, we need to have the clearance. So I have the clearance for the secret, but not top secret, which is only given to in really exceptional situation. Yeah, well, also my colleague has the top secret clearance. Only one person in the commission among the civil servants have that clearance. I don't have. I have one just below because I don't need it. You know, it's also a matter of need to know, and I don't need to know that data in the line of my work. You wanted to ask something?
I wanted to ask a question with regards to something that you mentioned a bit earlier than the insolvency in the database of insolvencies. You mentioned that the public officials, the public officials are required to declare bonds and stocks that they own, right?
Yes.
But this is only for the local bonds, for local instruments, or also
all
international?
sorts.
Okay. And what about cryptocurrencies?
Oh, that's where we have a problem here.
Okay.
Yes, this is one of the issues that emerged with us, let's say, 2 years ago, where in Slovenia, a lot of people, also those connected to the politicians, got rich with trading with cryptocurrencies. We had meetings with the tax authorities, with FYU. We actually were asking FYU in one concrete case that we were dealing with, because one person, one declarant, was doing business in Ukraine, Estonia, and some other countries that are known for purchasing and selling cryptocurrencies. They have like banks there. So this person was, according to her position in the public sector and her wealth status, she was not supposed to do any such trading because she could not have afforded it. So that's what triggered our attention. Of course, we turned to the cryptocurrencies banks and asked them for information. Of course, they remained silent. Only one cryptocurrency bank that has an office in Slovenia replied to us. Out of, I don't know how many there are. We sort of identified 16 of them that are quite important, but one just replied. So we went to FYU and showed them the transactions that were made. And we asked them whether this person could be doing the business, buying and selling the cryptocurrencies. And well, according to how they checked their databases, they checked modus operandi, and they said they think not. And then we discussed whether this is also a problem for them to do their investigations thoroughly, now bearing in mind that a lot of people have these wallets that are, somewhere in the cloud. You don't know what lands in the wallet and what goes out. And they said that actually they also addressed this to our tax authorities, but there's no political will at the moment to regulate this. So we are waiting for the EU to wake up, because at the point when the EU wakes up and they see that a lot of money is going, everywhere, and that they cannot put the finger on it, then they start regulating, and probably then we will also have to regulate this. At the moment, neither the police, tax authorities, FYI, nobody can, even if we detect, we cannot bring the investigation to the end because nobody is replying. They don't have the obligation to reply. So my answer is no, we are really poor in this respect.
So financial derivatives also are out of the...
Excuse me?
So financial derivatives like futures, options are also out of the scope, or?
No. We are, whatever it's with regard to...
are the public officials obliged to report
Yes.
on financial derivatives?
Yes, they have to report everything, but the cryptocurrencies are not mentioned in our law specifically. So we have a legal provision which specifically explains what they are obliged to report in the asset declarations form. And this kind of things were not mentioned like the cryptocurrencies. So we cannot ask them to do that. They do sometimes in practice, because the last, let's say, column in the form is you can add anything you wish. And they sometimes do write something also about the cryptocurrencies. I think it's because they are not quite sure whether we can detect that or not. So to be on the safe side, they are doing it. But only a few of them. I'm sure there are much more who are knowledgeable in this. They know that we cannot detect it, and they're not doing it. I mean, if you're just reading articles of various professors at various faculties that deal with these kind of topics, you can learn that nobody can detect that. Really, nobody can detect. If I open my account with the bank, cryptocurrency bank, outside Slovenia, they don't have any office in Slovenia. They're not regulated and subjected to our laws. I have this electronic wallet, or how it's called. Whatever comes in, I pay from that. It cannot be detected anywhere. Nobody's gonna know what I'm buying and selling. And transactions, bank transactions, are very important information, part of our investigation. This is after checking, let's say, the asset declaration form and its data, to find anything that would be a little bit inconsistent or standing out. and connecting it with various databases. The next thing you do when you see something fishy, something smelly, is you would ask the bank for the bank transactions. We don't have the access to the bank transactions as the tax authorities or the FYU have. They can just enter the database of the bank and they can see everything. We don't have that access yet, which means that we have to ask the bank to send us the transactions for a person for that period of time. We don't have to provide them with any reasoning. It's just we are asking. And then when you're checking all the transactions, sometimes something pops out. And then you can make a pattern. You can see that they are doing business with certain businesses or individuals. And then you're establishing whether there is a breach of our law. It's just investigation work. Okay. So to continue with the databases that we have access to, is we also have access to records of cash transactions and transfers to high-risk countries that we receive from FYU. Another important data source is the records of tangible assets of public sector entities. And this is important for us because in the past, we had a few cases where Nullaba Bank, you know it, was giving loans to various politicians and businessmen. And they would, to secure the loan, to ensure the loan, they would bring to the bank property, tangible property, like paintings from prominent painters and things like that. These items were never checked by the Nullaba staff, so they believed them that a certain painting was worth 50,000 euros. When those businessmen or the companies went bankrupt or the insolvency proceedings started against them, well, the bank couldn't retrieve the loan from them because, you know, the paintings were worth like maybe 50, 100 euros. What it made really more interesting is that in the ground floor, in the building of the headquarters of the bank, is the art gallery. That was even more funny, you know? You have an art gallery on the ground floor of your building, and you didn't bother to take the painting to the ground floor and show it to the art people and say, how much money would you give to purchase this painting? Is it worth 50,000 euros or not? Because we are giving a loan of 50,000 euros and they want to secure the loan. And that was a big case in Slovenia we had where we investigated this bank, state-owned bank, and how they were giving out loans to people that were connected with the politicians and the government and to the bank management. And the loans were not secured. And we also established how the committees within the bank didn't actually perform enough to check, you know, whether the items that were given to secure loans were worth enough to secure the loans. So this is a very important record of tangible assets, also because what we especially see at the local level is that the municipalities might sometimes sell paintings or other valuable items, but at the value that is not high enough. So in a way, they are damaging the public sector entity, right? The municipality. If I have a painting of 10,000 euros, but I sell it for 5,000 euros, I'm going to cause damages to my municipality. And this is happening also. So we have this access where we can check that, because we do get reports about such selling and purchasing, or you sell and then you purchase back for the twice of a value that you sold before, or you purchase something at 10,000 euros, which is actually worth 2,000 euros, because you have the connection, or the seller has the connection with you, and you are the mayor of a municipality, and you want to help out, and you're making the purchase. Also, the next register, property sales. We get a lot of reports on the property, especially owned by the municipalities, being sold to individuals well connected with the politicians at the lower amount than it actually is. So they sell forest, they sell land, which is, let's say, agricultural land, and which is not as worth as a land that can then be changed to where you can build the industrial buildings on, and then the value of that land increases. So for us, it's important to be able to detect all those selling and purchasing, and access to this database is also very important. Okay, and now we have come to the part of presentation where I would just like to show you what kind of data we get from these databases. You don't have to memorize it. It's just important to see what we play with. It's also very important, as we spoke earlier, that when you have a certain information, let's say on a legal person, that you get from one database, you need one common identifier that allows you to connect this legal person with also other databases. It doesn't help me a lot if I get from one database information on a company only, and this information only is reduced to the name of the company, but then from the other database, I get the registration number, but no name. I cannot connect then these two databases. So our law specifically says that when it comes to natural persons, we play with the data. So whatever we get from databases on a particular natural person, we need to have the uniform central registration number that every individual that is born in Slovenia gets, and the tax number. So this is what they have, what the Commission, for example, would have on me, or every database would have on me. But then every database would also add to that additional data. So in the, let's say, in the bank register, me as the owner of a company, they would have also my name, apart from the uniform central registration number and apart from the tax number. They would have my name, they would have my address, they would have, let's say, how much I invested in setting up in the company. Then, for example, let's say, the tangible assets register would have not only my uniform central registration number and the tax number, they would also have that I purchased, let's say, a painting from a municipality, and the data would be on what kind of painting and when I purchased it and for how much. So we have these, let's say, data that has to identify the person and is the same for every database that we retrieve information from. And the same goes for the legal entities. So with the legal entities, every database has the registration number and the tax number. And then insolvency register would provide us with some other data, but the other databases with the other. And this allows us to connect all different data from various databases on the same legal entity so that we don't make a mistake. And for example, we have two companies, ABC, let's say. Well, which one is the right one? Well, we will always know which one is the right one because we have the registration number and the tax number, and this is only given once to one particular company. Also, it's important, as I mentioned before, there are inspectors, there are police officers, and even us, we are conducting investigation. Our final decisions are taken to court. People do challenge our decisions. We establish, let's say, breach of integrity. Let me give you an example. We identified that the vice governor of the Bank of Slovenia owned an apartment and was renting it out. He didn't report the rent that he was receiving to the tax authorities. Stupid mistake, you would think. He should have known that he has to do that. When this was detected by the media, we started to investigate. The Bank of Slovenia, his employer, asked him about that. He immediately reported the rent and showed them the paper, but deleted the date on which he reported the rent to the tax authorities. Of course, the bank said, fine, but we want to see the date. We want to know whether you did report when you were supposed to, or you filed late submission, you filed late report. And of course, we were able to obtain the documents from the tax authorities, and we were able to establish the breach of integrity. So that means integrity in our law is that you did not comply with the expected behavior standards that apply to your office. So if you're a vice governor, you're expected to behave in this and that manner and to meet this and that standards. You didn't meet that, so you breached the integrity of that office. He took us to court, and if our data was not correct, we would lose the case, and that would damage our reputation. So we need to have solid data. We won, and he lost the job, he left, and that was a really good example where the court actually said it's the commission that establishes what are standards of integrity, depending on what kind of role in the public sector you have or what kind of office you hold. From the first database that I mentioned, from the Public Payments Administration, we get the information on the financial transactions. We get the information on like payment date, what was the amount, who paid, what was paid for, to whom it was paid, and various things. I will show you a little bit later how this is projected in the platform. I will go a little bit quickly from this, yes. Also, let's say business register, etc. You get data on persons that are associated with a particular company. So who established the company, who owns the company, who is the supervisor of the company. So we can also make this linkage because we do have incompatibility of functions. You cannot be an office holder here at the same time being a member of the supervisory board, especially if you're, as an office holder, supervising the performance and business of this company. You're supervising yourself, right? So we actually can detect incompatibility of functions and conflict of interest situation by connecting various data. Okay, let's go on. This is it's a lot of data. I will move forward. You have the slides, you will get the slides. It's just important that you see that the law is quite clear in terms of what we can get from various databases. This is also to protect our investigation and our oversight tasks and not to lose cases in court, because the majority of our cases are taken to court afterwards. So we are paying attention to the fact that our investigation has to be solid, because it would damage our reputation. Okay, I will go to the part where, sorry. So, I will go to the part where I will try to show you how our platform, ЕРАР, is not only dedicated to online transactions, but how it was upgraded and now consists of various components that help us to perform our oversight tasks. When we developed this platform, and it still performs the same function, was with the two objectives. One was to ensure the public oversight. I mentioned there were business restrictions, violations detected, but also, a lot of people are monitoring what the municipalities are paying for. There was one municipality that paid for a bridge. They actually paid for constructing a bridge, which was very, very expensive. And the civil society filed a report to us. We didn't find any violations in relation to our law, but we did send it to the Court of Audit and to the Supervisory Board of the municipality. It was up to them to decide whether it was too pricey to pay for such a bridge. So it's, the public is being interested, and they do react, especially when they think that something is overexpensive. At the same time, the transparency of the public transactions is strengthening integrity of the public sector entities, but also of the people who work in these public sector entities. If I know that as a mayor, whatever I pay for is going to be projected on the website, I'm going to think twice if I want to pay something that is not necessary or is too pricey. So in a way, it has a general preventative effect. And by this, it increases the integrity of my office, but also of the body that I work for. I mentioned, because of the public oversight, and because of our oversight, and oversight of the police, and of the inspectors, and of the journalists, etc., the level of accountability of the people working in the public sector, either they're civil servants involved in, let's say, public procurement, etc., or office holders who order that something is paid for, the level of accountability increases. If we can show that, let's say, according to the transactions, there was a company which emerged and became involved with a particular municipality after one person became the mayor of that municipality. And this company didn't exist before. It just emerged at the time when this person took over being the mayor. And now this company is doing business with this municipality all the time, while the rest of the companies that did the same business years before, so somehow they just were pushed away, then we can establish that there might be some connections behind, some conflict of interest or any kind of connection, private connection. So this is one of the, let's say, goals that we want to achieve with this tool. Secondly is to facilitate debate on what we are planning to do with the public money. Because when the municipality or the ministry decides to invest into something or to purchase something, the civil society or the citizens, they do raise their voices about that, and they start asking questions. And in Slovenia, they're quite active. I don't know how it's here, but in Slovenia, they are active. Just now, for example, the municipality of Ljubljana is cutting down trees in the main city park. And the people from the environmental NGOs and the concerned citizens are raising questions, especially whether there is the necessity to cut down trees and who is going to purchase the wood. Because it's costly, especially this type of wood. So who is going to buy it? At what price? Is it going to be put on auction? We have auctions of wood in Slovenia. And the Austrians, for example, that are crazy about our wood, they could buy for like 50,000 euros one tree trunk because it's an old tree. And they will use it for, I don't know, for building a house. And then you ask questions. Is the mayor selling this to his friends at a discount rate? And where is the money going to? Is it going to the municipality budget or not? So, you know, it helps follow the transactions. You compare the prices then with the market prices, and then you start asking questions, and then they have to explain. And also, having such a tool, it decreases the risk for illicit enrichment or abuse of function, etc., that I mentioned already now when I was describing the objectives. But I did mention all of this already that is written here. So the competences of the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption are various. We do asset declaration monitoring. We do conflict of interest prevention, incompatibility detecting prevention. We do business restrictions prevention, right? So gifts, lobbying, etc. So the data that we are obtaining from these databases help us in various ways to fulfill our tasks in these fields. That's what I'm trying to say with this slide. So it's not just to project who is doing business with what, but to identify patterns when a certain, as I mentioned, company is connected to a particular office holder. Or maybe to detect, let's say my colleague was looking through the gift register, which is also published in ERAR platform. And he noticed that a mayor declared a gift, a watch, not a mayor, excuse me, a member of the Court of Audit. They were visited by a partner institution from South America. And he declared, I received a watch. Then we have a gifts regulation, which says below 50 and above 30, you have to declare, but you can keep it. Above 50, you have to hand it over to the employer. So his watch was around 35 euros, which means he did declare it because probably the staff knew that he got it, but he was able to keep it. I don't know if you ever had experience with South American institutions. They don't give you a watch like Mickey Mouse watch for 35 euros.
They will give you a Rolex for 35 euros.
Yes. Yes, but the real one. 35, and then you have to add a few zeros. And that triggered our investigation. You know? Then you ask, what kind of watch? Show me the watch, send me the photos, and then you try to find the market price, and then you see whether there was any violation of the rules. So you can really use this data, and this was just because he had to report the watch. And now how our ERAR looks like in practice. It would be better if I had access to the website and I could click and show you, but what I try to do the same way is to just do the screenshots and show you here. So this is the first page when you enter our ERAR. It says that on the left upper side corner, it says that this is the data that is publicly accessible. If you want to have access to some personal data that we can obtain from the databases, you can, but this tool will ask you to confirm that you're not a robot. So you have to do a certain test, and then the tool will then show you also certain personal data. Let me give you an example. If you're an advocate and you have a law firm, you can use one bank account for your company, but also as a private bank account. And the money that comes to your bank account, we don't know whether it's yours or of your company. And we had a case when one lawyer sued us saying, that's my private bank account. And we resolved that in court and also with a clear legal basis, saying, well, if you're using the same bank account from the private transactions and from the transactions of your company, you should be aware of the fact that your name might appear here. So either you have two different bank accounts or you accept, let's say, the risk. Then here you have the information on basic statistics of ERAR. For example, when I was making these slides, at that time we had around 271 million transactions that are shown in this platform. And at that point, we also had 6,300 and something public sector entities that are presented here with their transactions. And also companies, 623,000 companies that somehow were doing business with the public sector entities. Some of them have already been removed from the business register. It's around 55%. Why? Because this platform is showing the transactions from as of 2003 onwards. So some of them ceased to exist. And then you have here the biggest, in between, in the middle, the biggest budget users. And the first is the Ministry of Finance. Of course, they're paying for our salaries. Then the second is the Pension and Handicapped Insurance Fund. So part from our salary goes to that fund from our pensions. So just to give you an overview. Of course, you can click and get the rest of the list. And then below is the biggest budget, the receivers from the budget. And it says salaries, pensions, salaries, and then it's this fund that I mentioned, and the Ministry of Finances, and the bank, NLB, and then HSE, which is our holding for the electricity. Why? Because the public sector entities are paying to the state-owned companies that are providing them with electricity and stuff like that. So this is, let's say, what you get at the beginning. But then you want to, search, and you're interested, let's say, in the commission and what the commission is paying for. And you would put here in the browser, the first bracket is plaćnik, which means the budget user, the one that is paying from the budget. And you would insert there the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption. And if you clicked search, you would get all the entities that are receiving money from the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption as of 2003 onwards. Or you could approach the task differently. You want to know some more information about a particular company. You know that one company is connected to some politician. So you would, in the lower, it's not bracket, how it's called? Field. You would insert this company's name and leave the upper field empty. Click search, and then you would get all the transactions and all the public sector entities with whom this company did business. And then if, for example, and this is what the people did, right? So they inserted the mayor's wife's company, and then they just checked on the list whether that particular municipality was on the list. And if it was on the list in that period when her husband was the mayor, voila, it's a breach of our law. And then you have, okay, that I explained a little bit. So what I did here is I entered, you see above, Комисија за препречување корупција, which is our commission. So we are the payer, the budget user. And here are the transactions that the commission did, and all transactions are listed as per the amount. So the biggest amount is on the first place, and you see it goes for salaries. Actually, more than 90% of our budget is spent on salaries. We really have a little bit amount of money for like purchasing of paper and stationery and stuff, or investments, yeah, like investing into these kind of tools. That's not really a big amount. But then you see what I circled in green. So the first is the transactions that you see. And the transactions are presented here from 2003 onwards, you see? And in 2003, we had a really low budget. That's why you have these columns that are small. Then the budget increased. What you can do with the search engine is you're, let's say, interested in, here it says Zelinka DOO. This is the company. So you would click on the company Zelinka DOO, and it would show you columns in various periods of time where Zelinka DOO did business with the commission. Or you're interested in a particular period. You, for example, know that Zelinka DOO is a company owned by Janez. And Janez was Mr. Drago Kos's friend, let's say. I'm just making this up. Don't tell on me to Drago. And you know that Drago was the chief commissioner in a certain period of time. So you would, with the mouse, you mark that period. You just click and pull, and that will pop out. And it will enlarge the transactions. These columns would enlarge for that period, and you would get a more detailed list of the companies that did business with the commission in that period. And then you can see whether this Zelinka was actually doing any business in that period of time or not. So this is, let's say, one feature. The next is e-invoices. So you see what is marked in green. E-invoices are something that we had to introduce or transpose from the EU directive. So it's standardized invoices that replace paper form invoices. We have a law which clearly prescribes what an invoice should entail. And this is also in our law. So the data that we are receiving from that database on the e-invoices, we have the access to that. So you can also search as per an invoice. So for example, you come across in an investigation that a certain invoice was paid. You don't know exactly what, but let's say you have the amount and you have the period, or maybe the entity. and you have the period. And you could search by this. This is what it helps you, this feature. Then you have the basic data. This is the next. The basic data is actually the information on the budget user on the commission. So we have this registration number. You have information on when the commission was set up. So on 1st of October 2004, you have the description of our body. So it's independent, autonomous state entity. Then you have the type of activity we perform. And you have the tax number. This is what allows us to connect the commission with various databases. Then you have who are the legal representatives of the institution. What I'm describing to you is the same for every institution in this platform, either from the public or the private sector. So when you, instead of Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, you have a private sector company and you go to the legal representatives, you might find an office holder who is the legal representative, which could mean a breach of incompatibility rules. Or he didn't declare that he is the owner of a company, which would be interesting for the asset declaration people. So here is the where you have to insert the data showing that you're not a robot. Why? Because you get the access to the names, personal data, so to the names of the legal representatives. So before you see this, you would have, please show us that you're not a robot, you click something, do a test, and once you do the test, then you get this. And you can see Drago Kos was the legal representative between that and that period, Goran Klemenčić onwards, Boris Stefanec onwards, and now Robert Čumny. You can then click on the name of the person and see with whom this person is connected with maybe some other companies or public sector entities. So you can find this kind of connections as well. Then it's the timeline. You can search transactions as per the timeline, so the time when the particular transaction was made. This is important, as I mentioned before, when you have a legal representative of a company and maybe an office holder, and whether they are somehow connected. You know that they are connected, but you want to establish whether they did business, or whether a legal representative of a public sector institution, when he was in office, whether he was making any transactions or paying any invoices to a particular company with which he is somehow connected. So you can also search according to this. And then you have the gifts received. So every year when the public sector entities have to submit a list of gifts that were received in the previous year, we would publish it here. And you can then actually see who received the gift, what was received, at what value, and from whom. And then here you can also try to establish some conflict of interest. And also whether this list of gifts is actually accurate. You know what people do? They check the local magazines. Then you see the mayor receiving a really important painting from a painter. And then you wait, and when it's end of March and this appears there, you check, is that painting on the list? Oh, it's not. Let's report this to the commission. But we do that at the same time, if we investigate this. Then business restrictions. So when our chief commissioners and their deputies were in office, they had to declare companies with whom they are somehow connected or their family members are connected. So, wives, children, brothers, sisters. And they declared, for example, this. Let's say Mr. Goran Klemencic, his wife, is a lawyer. So he declared Zidar Klemencic, Nina, lawyer. So everybody knows that this company, the Commission cannot do business with. And we know for which period of time when he was in office, and you can check that on the other website, on the other feature. And then, of course, there's some cooling off period that you have to bear in mind, which is set in the law. So when we are establishing any violation in terms of business restrictions violations, we would check this. So sometimes we would even establish that an office holder failed to report, because they have to report a list of bodies or companies to their own public sector institution, and then that public sector institution submits the list to us. Why both institutions are involved? Because the public sector entity for which the office holder works is the one that has to know with whom they cannot do business. So that's the most important. But for us, it's important that we make it transparent, so that we enable the public oversight, but also that we can monitor whether they comply with the rules. And then it's the using the search engine the other way around. Here I presented you with how you look at a particular public sector entity, so by inserting Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, and then you get a detailed overview of all the features that are presented in ERAR, or you can do the other way around, and you want to, let's say, check gifts and get all the information about the gifts received in the public sector entities, or you want to check business restrictions of all public sector entities. So depending on what you want to do is how you're going to approach this. And this is just a few examples of what are the hits, what you will get if you approach searching from the other angle. Also, what is very important is the lobbying records. I think it's here. Does it say lobbying? Yes. Okay. Lobiranje. One of the last, let's say, features that we added was lobbying records. Every public sector employee, either civil servant or the office holder, has to report a lobbying contact. So they can receive lobbyists. This is part of being an active in participating in public decision making. It's protected by our constitution. So if a company or an individual or a civil society organization want to be heard and approach the minister or whoever is working on a particular, let's say, law, or even the public procurement documentation before the public procurement procedure starts, they can access the decision makers and provide them with their input. That's allowed. What we want is that these people in the public sector entities then declare that, so that within 8 days they have to fill out a form that they were approached by a lobbyist and what they discussed and what was the outcome of the discussion. They have to send that to us and we publish it. And then this is then connected with the public procurement portal. You want to know whether these people, these businessmen, companies, were successful let's say, when they approached the Ministry on Environment with some ideas on how a particular public procurement specification should look like? Was it written in a way that they were the only bidder? This is what you want to know at the end of the day. And you're going to connect this with the data from the public procurement portal. Or you might, we are also trying to connect, we are in the process of discussing this with the e-democracy. That's another portal where we publish draft laws and draft bylaws. What we want to do is to show if the Ministry of Justice is preparing a bylaw and then somebody from the ministry has reported, an NGO approached us discussing this article, and they wanted us to come up with this solution. And then at the end of the day, at the e-democracy, you see that there was a change in that draft bylaw, and that particular article was amended. You can connect that as well. So these kind of linkages we want to make. You want to ask something? Okay. 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 Just two examples of what we managed to do with this kind of analysis. All this data is machine readable and it can be retrieved. So if you're an NGO, you can get the data, we will give it to you, and then you can do whatever you want to do with this data. What we did ourselves was, at one point in time, we wanted to see, this is not mentioned here, whether with the change of the government, the companies that do provide certain services or goods to the government can be linked with a particular government in power. So now we have government A, then it's government B, then it's again government A. Do the same companies do business with governments A and B, or do they change? We established, according to analyzing these transactions, that when there was government A and then government A, the same companies were providing PR services, stationery, furniture, cars, security, stuff. When the government B was in power, these companies just like no longer either existed or they didn't do any business with the public sector entities, but the new entities, private companies appeared and they did business. So we could establish that there was a clear link. And we did the same with the providers of the PR service, because they are really important lobbyists. At the same time, there are a few companies that provide PR services, but they in fact are lobbyists. They have access to various politicians. And we also focused on NGOs to see, because there is a lot of criticism sometimes in Slovenia, especially coming from the right-wing government, that NGOs are connected with certain political parties and that they're actually not doing anything and they're just getting money from the public budget. And we wanted to show whether that's true or not. And that's all for me.